is in the middle of the hold, not if the ship may have exceeded the increased bending moment or shear force. She may also have undue torsional moments. However, the load on the bulkheads may be greater than designated for introducing abnormal stresses on the bulkheads and cross-deck structure. Some bulk cargo needs to be level trimmed to prevent them from shifting. The recommendations of IMO Bulk Cargo Code and other are to be followed in this respect. Block loading. This loading consists of loading one hold completely and partially one hold adjacent to it. If such loading is not approved in the loading cases of the loading manual, it is not allowed. This is particularly the case when loading conditions have been studied in alternately loading with summer freeboard. When the owner wants to use tropical fresh, this specific new case has to be approved by the Classification Society. Indeed, too much load on both sides of a transverse bulkhead may damage it as well as the top cross-deck structure. Unloading. All limitations given for loading is also applicable to unloading sequence. It is necessary that all unloading plan be prepared by the master and strictly adhered to. The main difference in the duration of the unloading is that generally it's much greater time to take the unload than to load, and this gives more time to react to the unexpected events. But also you can ballast the ship faster than deballasting it. Damage by unloading tools. The unloading is generally made by heavy grabs finished using bulldozers, hydraulic hammers, and other tools. The structure of the holds, frames, brackets, double bottoms, transverse stools, coamings, deck corners, etc., is sometimes damaged by the loading tools. It is important to underline that a small crack initiated by these tools may develop rather rapidly during the time of a single voyage and produce a catastrophic consequence if undetected or left without repair. This is particularly the case of old bulk carriers having their structures corroded or rusted by previous corrosive cargoes such as coal containing sulfur. This is important that after unloading and prior to loading, a structural inspection be performed by a qualified person of the crew to cover the complete list of sensitive areas. Decisions for repair are to be taken immediately with the advice of a class surveyor. Change of ballast at sea. Some ports forbid deballasting water to be taken in other ports, and then it may be necessary to change or partly completely ballast water at sea. The ballast change has to be planned similar to a cargo loading, and during the operation, the bending moment and shear forces are to be maintained within the at-sea limits. The ballast change plan is to be prepared and strictly adhered to. Deballasting and reballasting sequences are normally to be made symmetrically at starboard and port side to avoid inducing torsional load to the hull. Conclusions. The list of precautions to prevent overloading of the ship structure has been given. It is ultimate importance of all parties concerned to follow these recommendations and precautions to prevent overloading of the ship's structure and to prevent damage and the possible catastrophic event of a hull failure. Conditions to meet for good loading operations are as follows. There's a complete loading manual on board. There's a good loading instrument on board. The crew is well trained to use them, and the communication is good between the ship and the shore facility. When these conditions are met, it will be easy to follow the recommendations prescribed above. It is only a matter of professionalism. And on page 251, there is basically a diagram that shows the loading sequence of a particular ship, just for example. Now, this is a loading plan And again, this is figure 10-14 on page 251. And the figure illustrates a typical loading plan. The loading plan is prepared by the ship's master, not only for the ship's officers, but also for the stevedore and ship loaders and loading terminal authorities to follow. The loading plan details a step-by-step method of the loading pours and deballasting sequences to ensure the ship's longitudinal hull strength is not compromised during the loading operation. The loading plan cannot be made without consulting the vessel's loading manual or loading instrument, which is the loading computer. And that concludes the chapter 10 in Stability and Trim for the Ship's Officer, 4th edition. The next section we'll take up in the future will be we'll have an overview of shipboard computers, and then that's starting with chapter 11, and that starts part 4 of the book, which is applications. After we do shipboard loading computers, then chapter 12 we talk about damage conditions on ships, the ship in the damage condition, and surprisingly enough, mismanaged tanks is easily defined by me as a damaged condition on the vessel. And then after we get through that, we'll be into practical stability and trim considerations in chapter 13. And then finally we're going to get over to chapter 14, stability requirements for loading bulk grain. And then we go on to chapter 15, marine disasters. And when we get through chapter 15, marine disasters, then we're back to the appendix of the book where we have some license exam questions and useful information. And what's interesting in the appendix of the book is all the information you need for the license exam, as far as the stability books and diagrams they use in the license exam, and stability letters and things like that. So we'll continue next time, starting with part 4 of the book, applications, and that'll be chapter 11, shipboard computers and approved stability booklet. Thanks for listening. Well, that's my license question of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it challenged you. And if you have any questions about it, you know where to find me on LinkedIn. Now please stand by for a word from my sponsor.